Again and again, we have been talking about valuation, balance sheet, and assets. So, intellectual property as an asset to the business. When we look at, I'm not sure how many of you must have used some antivirus software or any SaaS-based subscription, maybe any of the portals which you use where you pay online. So, what are they really doing? Are they selling that software to you? McAfee, Norton, any other quick heal antivirus? Are they really selling that to you? You get a key, you get a subscription, it is there for 1 year. So what are they really doing? It is they are licensing their product to you for a particular period of time, and after the expiry of that period you will have to again make the payment and renew it. And that is what happens in SaaS based softwares also. SaaS stands for software as a service. It evolved from different aspects in IT industry, wherein we started with platform as a service, then infrastructure as a service, and right now it's end-to-end software as a service. So now if you really want to use a software, you don't go and buy a CD and install it in your system. It's all over cloud. You get your user ID and password, you make the payment. If it's a free service, you still make the payment. So if you don't make the payment, but you still register with them altogether. So if you're creating an account on Facebook, you don't buy Facebook and you get and install it on your desktop or your mobile. You simply register, you subscribe, you take a subscription and agree. When you tick mark that I accept the terms and conditions, that is where licensing or franchising or any other form of business collaboration is coming into the picture. Wherein and how are these organizations able to do it? You can license it out only when you own it. If you do not own it, how can you really license it out? I mean, same principles of property law coming into the picture, where you cannot sell what you do not own, where you cannot license, where you cannot mortgage what you do not have. So the property must belong to you. So how do you really prove that the property belongs to you? Is under the law, under some codified statute, maybe through a patent, maybe through a trademark, maybe through any other form which really exercises and establishes your ownership around that intellectual property. And that is how entire businesses of big corporations are currently built upon. AWS, Amazon, Jeevansathi.com, Shadi.com, Naukri.com, any of these providers which you look at, they are not really selling a product, they are just licensing it out. And that is where software licensing agreement is coming into the picture. I am giving these very basic examples so that we can connect with them. These are basically B2C products reaching out directly to the consumer. But when you look at business transactions happening between entities, B2B transactions happening in the fintech domain, happening in e-commerce, in retail space, in e-banking, when these domains, the transactions are happening, they are happening between two entities. So just imagine that if the nature of transaction is such that between one common individual and an entity, there comes so much of licensing, so much of collaboration and legal agreements coming into the picture. What will be the implication when two entities are collaborating with each other? So this will be multifold. The nature of complexity will increase at an exponential basis when we are interacting in a B2B domain and not in a B2C domain. So all in all, it is revolving around your intellectual property. You often, I'm not sure if you are active over LinkedIn, you must be uh, going through a lot of news. Microsoft acquires this company, Google ties up with Amazon for this, and a lot of such news comes in wherein two organizations are coming together. So what are they really dealing it? Are they really interacting on the basis of some physical assets which they have, or they are talking about intellectual property? So that is where transfer of intellectual property is taking place, because they have been able to establish that identity for each and every intellectual property by means of a patent, by means of a trademark, by means of copyright having there. And these aspects I'm talking about is something between two businesses only. There could be other impacts also. It could be a business house with their vendors, it could be a business house with their contractors, it could be a business house with their employees. So there are certain other aspects to it also, wherein how do they really protect these will be maybe through some clause in the particular employment agreement, in the contractor agreement. Those are other aspects to it which we'll be exploring under trade secrets altogether. So till now we have talked more about the roles and all the other different intellectual properties going hand in hand. So somewhere you cannot treat them. If you're a student of law, you will be going chapter by chapter where you read one statute after another. But if you are a observer of law, if you are into business, if you are into, or even if you are into practice of law, wherein you are engaging with your clients, with your consultants, it is important to understand that their language may not be exactly the legal terminology with which the law students will be familiar with. So when you are pitching to a client, when you are reaching out to some corporate entity as a lawyer, even though as a lawyer, then also you should have at least some basic knowledge about how businesses function and try to talk in that terminology. You can obviously make the legal translation done within your own mind. Some business guy comes to you and says, I've created this and I don't want anybody to steal. Now, he has not used the word that I want my product to be patented for 20 years. And he says that I have invested so much and now I want you to help me create a monopoly over this because my team has invested 2 years on this. Now, you know at the back of your mind that he's talking about a patent, but that is something you will be able to understand only when you are able to connect legal with business world altogether, because business will always talk in a different language wherein law will not be their primary objective. A law practitioner may be a specialist in their domain altogether, but every decision with respect to legal covenants, legal agreements, clauses will be taken keeping business in mind. If that business is getting impacted, then forget about what the law says. People will refrain from going into it. So we have to try and be less of a subject matter specialist and more of a consultant when we are really connecting with people from some other arena or some other domain. Obviously, legal knowledge will help, but we have to bridge this gap between business and legal altogether. And it's not just about business and legal. Law is obviously for the people. So if you are committing a murder on the streets, or if you are talking about IPC or CRPC, then also it is related to a real life transaction, and your real life and your knowledge of real life happenings will be important. Same goes for intellectual property, just like in criminal law or your civil procedure code, everything is related to transactions to people. So it could be business transactions, it could be commercial transactions, it could be civil, criminal, or any other nature of transactions with which. So law cannot just go in isolation, and we have to see things from that perspective. Then protected intellectual property assets can be exported abroad. Obviously, when you own some property, it can be exported, transferred. We already discussed these points. Any of the organizations you look at, Apple, Microsoft, BlackBerry, Amazon, AWS, Google, WhatsApp, have developed a powerful revenue stream because of their extensive IP assets. So if you really tell me that the strength of WhatsApp is not in the application, but in the WhatsApp office or in the cash balance which they have in their bank account, is something that nobody will accept, because a lot of people are sitting with cash, a lot of people are sitting with other assets. But what really makes WhatsApp is their intellectual property. A lot of code from open source. Someone talked about open source, Google keeping all their codes in open source. But then why is nobody really coming up with a competing product? Wikipedia, again, completely open source, and open source is a model which has really evolved in the last 10 years. That is something wherein we are all heading to. If you just compare two encyclopedias, MSN Encarta and Wikipedia, and go back 10 years back, 20 years back, when Microsoft came up with a team of professionals, team of experts to build their MSN Encarta encyclopedia. And on the other hand, we just had a group of amateurs who were just keeping it open source and coming up with their products. And today, Wikipedia beats MSN Encarta. So the potential of open source cannot be undermined, but it is not answering the question of the businesses maintaining monopoly altogether. So even if Google can give some aspects of their code, some aspects of their algorithm in open source, no one is still able to replace Google altogether. So obviously, we are in an information age. Things will be open for public to access. But then, what aspect of it is open and what aspect of it is not open is for the person to is left to the wisdom and judgment of that person altogether. So that is where the scope of interpretation lies, and that is where the gray area is. If you notice one thing throughout what we are talking about, if you see the color in the background, it's all gray. Why I have kept that color intentionally as gray? to highlight around the matter which we are talking about. We have to understand that we are talking about a very gray area. Till now, what I have been talking about is more of codified, structured patents, trademark, everything is written. Still, there is a scope of interpretation, and there are a lot of gray areas. There are a lot of unethical practices happening in the world of patents, huge legal battles happening between pharmaceutical organizations. There's a concept of evergreening of patents. So, I do, in the interest of time, I'm refraining from really deviating from the main topic, but this is something interesting. So, evergreening of patent is like you're given a right, you can exploit for 20 years. There's a thoughtful consider. We discussed in the initial time that why 20 and not less, not more. But then after the expiry of 20 years, now this is going to be in the open, and other entities are going to enter into it, and you will not exercise that same monopoly in the market. So if Novartis or any other pharmaceutical organization, they come up with a drug, they exploit it for 20 years, they have a patent for it, they sell at a very exorbitant price in the market, maybe 40 rupee a tablet, 50 rupee a tablet. And by the time 20 years are over, every other player, Glaxo, Glenmark, Ranbaxy, every other player has started making that drug. And now, obviously, because of this elements of coming into economics, new entrants coming up, supply going up, demand going getting less, and obviously cost will go less. So the monopoly which was being exercised by Novartis for 20 years will be coming to an end, and this is not what Novartis would want. So what will they do now? They will again come up with doing some kind of invention which will fall exactly under the definition of what satisfies the criteria for getting a patent, and they will come up with a new product altogether, which may not be a new invention. It will just be a changed form of it, a novel form of it, and apply for a patent again. Sometimes they may succeed also, sometimes they may not succeed. But what they are basically trying to do is they are trying to make your patent evergreen. So that is something they want to keep this limited period of monopoly for an indefinite period of time. And if you get time, if you have curiosity, if you are curious about IPR, just see some legal battles that have happened between pharmaceutical industries in the pharma world, between two organizations over a drug which cures cancer, over a drug which cures diabetes, and how, to what extent companies have really gone from one version to another level version, from a solid form to a liquid form. They tried, they made desperate attempts to really come up with something that will satisfy the definition of patent again, so that they can get a patent again and exploit the market for another 20 years. So you can imagine a company with its operations in 140 countries, companies like Novartis, Glenmark, Ranbaxy, if they get another monopoly of 20 years because of one tiny loophole in their patent structure, in their product structure altogether, imagine the amount of impact that it would have on the entire business overall, not just for Novartis, but all the other players and for the community as a whole. We are all aware about those studs for which the heart patients after bypass surgery, which they have been getting from the US market. US has patented it. US is the most aggressive player when it comes to patents. They just want to patent anything and everything. If tomorrow US gets some opportunity to really patent oxygen or patent any other thing which they can really make fall under the definition of patents, they will really do it. So if we really want to understand business, we should really read how US thinks, how US. I'm not really promoting a capitalist mindset, but I do believe in it. But when we are talking about capitalism, US is something that we should really look at learning from them. So, and when we are talking about capitalism, we cannot ignore the importance of patents altogether. Trademarks always is there, but it is patents which are the driving force behind it. The most important one we have still not even started.